Hi, my name is Sheridan Gaxiola. I'm going to be summarizing the About Behaviorism Skinner book, chapter 4, which is about operant behavior. So he kind of starts the chapter off just going over the differences between positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and then later on he talks about punishment. So I figured I'd start there as well. So he's saying positive reinforcement strengthens any behavior that produces it. So like if you go to work and you receive a paycheck, then you're more likely to go back to work so that you can get another paycheck. And negative reinforcement strengthens behaviors that reduce it. So I feel like the classic example is like if you're in the car and you don't have your seatbelt on and the bell's going off. That's like an aversive sound to most people, and so we'll put our seatbelt on so that the sound will stop. And then he goes over operant conditioning. And I thought it was interesting because he brought natural selection and like evolution into it, which I've never really thought about before when I've thought about ABA and behavior. But it makes a lot of sense. He's saying that we're more susceptible to reinforcement if it helps us to survive. So like all of our natural drives like food and water and stuff. And then I feel like one of the biggest points he makes in the chapter, he's talking about feelings, because he says in the chapter that like feelings and the mind and all of that play a huge role in our behavior, but you just can't really say that feelings cause you to act, which it was interesting to read because he nitpicks every little part of what you could say. You know, I'm hungry, like I want to make some food, or like that sounds good, or it would be fun to do this. Like he kind of goes over each kind of example and explains how he would explain it to somebody, that feelings aren't causally affected or effective. So his point about that is that your learning history can help you know that you're hungry. So like, before in the past I've felt this way, and then I've acted to make food, and then that satisfied my hunger. So that's how he would explain it, not saying, oh, I feel like I want something yummy to eat, so I'm gonna make dinner. It's more of like a survival thing, like, okay, I need food, and in the past I've done this and it gave me food, so I'm gonna do it again. So it makes you more likely to do something, which brings back to the natural selection. He also talks about how wants are reinforcement driven and needs are more survival driven, so it's more of a aversive thing. So like if you don't do this, you're gonna die. Like if you don't eat, you're gonna die. So there's a difference between wanting food and needing food. And he goes to say like an event is not reinforcing because it reduces a need, because food is reinforcing even if you're not starving to death. You can still eat even if you're full because something tastes good. So an event isn't just reinforcing because it reduces a need. It can be reinforcing because it's a want. And then I also liked where he said, a person who needs or wants food is particularly likely to be reinforced by food, and that he is particularly likely to engage in any behavior which has previously been reinforced with food. So if you're hungry, I feel like that's a big example. It's food right now. But if you're hungry, you're gonna make food. If you're hungry, you're gonna go to the store. You're more likely to do those things that are gonna turn out to give you what you want. And he also says that, and to go back to that real quick, the condition, which would be you feeling hungry, is selected for operant conditioning for survival. So like that would probably outweigh something else because of your survival needs. Okay, So he says wishing and hoping are not causing for feelings. They are there when no behavior can be done. So it's not a driving force. So if you say like, oh, I wish I could do this, or like, I miss you, or things like that, that's not like a causing force to drive you to act. Wishing and hoping are just there when you can't do anything about it, you know? So it's kind of like, I mean, and he gives an example, like, if you're missing somebody, like if you're like in a long distance relationship, as soon as you're with the person, you don't feel that missing anymore. Or like longing, he says, it goes away. And so it's not like a driving force because that's not what actually is bringing you to act. It's just a feeling you have when you can't actually act upon it. And then as soon as you're able to act upon it, that goes away. And so since he's like nitpicking all of the feelings and thinkings and wantings, sorry, I have dogs. He says, rather than saying I feel or I have an idea to, like a behaviorist would say, we say the behavior was emitted. So by emitted, he's meaning there's no necessary prior causal event that led to that behavior. And so he goes into like, you think that you have free will and you have the freedom to do whatever you want. And, you know, like if all of a sudden I decided I want to go skydiving, like there doesn't necessarily have to be this big drive behind it. I decided this, and so I'm gonna do it. But that's not necessarily because I felt like it, you know, that's the feeling wasn't the thing that drove me to go do it. It was just like an emitted, there was no prior event that caused me to go skydiving, you know, in this case, if I randomly said that. So that's kind of the point he's trying to make, is that it's emitted rather than, oh, I feel, so I did. And he says that freedom is the lack of any prior determination. So we feel like we have free will when nothing was pushing us or determining us to feel that way. And so that's kind of like that power that people feel, is that like, oh, I did this because I wanted to, not because anything drove me to do that. And that's kind of the argument he's making, is that like everything has something behind it. Because yeah. He also says if you are positively reinforcing a behavior, no escape or change of the behavior should take place, which makes sense. So like if you're getting reinforced with like a paycheck or something, and like you're super happy about it and everything's going well, like there shouldn't be any reason why you would stop wanting to get that, and so you would continue behaving in the way that would produce a paycheck. And then he says motives and purposes are of the brain and heart of man, and consequences are in a world of fact. Which pretty much just means like, his argument is like everything that you're doing is based off of contingencies and consequences of positive or negative reinforcement or punishment. And so everything you do is because you have a prior learning history, you know, from when you were a baby, like with like the hunger and everything. And so everything you do is based off of reinforcement. There's nothing that would be from a motive or a purpose and all of that. So I'll read another quote. So he says, to look for a match is to look in a manner previously reinforced by finding matches. And so the point that I'm making about that, or what he's trying to make about that, is that you're looking for something because in the past when you've looked for something, you found it, not because you want to look for it. Pretty repetitive. And he goes on, and it kind of just repeats himself about all of the same things, like reinforcement schedules, so people who feel like if you're frustrated or if the client you're working with is frustrated, it's probably because there was a termination of your custom reinforcement, so maybe you're not giving the reinforcement quick enough for that person. So like, for example, I work with kids, and my youngest kid that I work with is 2, and we give her a reinforcement with every trial we run, because if we try to span it out right now, at least, she would just stop acting. She doesn't, it's not worth it to her to answer our questions or to, behave in a certain way if she's not going to get it soon enough to her liking. And so for her, we have to reinforce like a big reinforcement after every trial. Whereas with like my other older kid that's 4, which is still pretty young, but for him, like I can say, "Oh, good job" after a trial, or "Oh, nice job," or like "nice work." And then after like maybe 5 to 10 trials, then he gets his big reinforcement. So like along the way, I'm giving him a little bit, but he can wait longer and he doesn't need as much because he has a really good learning history with me as well, which was the last point I was going to bring up. Um, is that like frequent reinforcement builds faith. And so with that specific kid, the 4-year-old, he was like super attached to the iPad for a long time and like didn't ever give it up. It was like a big battle every time. And so we don't use it with him all that often, but if we do use it with him, now it's come to the point where like he knows, like if I have it, take it from him, he can get it back and he can earn it back, and he understands like, okay, if I do something for you, then I get this. And so positive and frequent reinforcement just builds faith in the person, that if I do this again, I can get this and it's okay. And it kind of stops that frustration that can happen. And then the last thing I'll say is that he makes the point that reinforcement supplies information. So that's the same thing that I was talking about. Like if the kid knows like, oh, if I do this, that's awesome, and like I get all of these things, this is a good thing to do, then they're more likely to act on that again and do it again. So I guess the question I would pose is like, what do you think about how Skinner's so like he acknowledges feelings in the mind and all of that, but he's very like, but that doesn't cause anything. So I guess I just was wondering, like, how do you guys feel about that? Because for me, when I was reading it, I was like, okay, yeah, I know, but you're being, a little intense about this. So what are your guys' opinions on that? So yeah, thank you.